Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today I'm going to offer up some impressions of gameplay on Gettysburg, A Time for Heroes from Worthington Publishing. Now this is a two-player game that allows you to play the entire Battle of Gettysburg in the American Civil War in 2 hours or less. As we start out on this, I want to offer up one caveat. I've spent about 8 to 10 hours with the game right now, so I don't feel comfortable calling this a full review, but I have experienced enough of the gameplay to offer up some impressions of that experience, and that's what this is. After the game was published, and I wasn't aware of this when I made my initial overview video of the game, the designers got together and published solitaire rules for the game too. So the game can now be played as either the Confederate forces or the Union forces against this bot. And so I had a chance to play that as well. So in this impressions video, we're going to look at two-player and the solitaire experience and talk about both of those. To start out with the two-player experience, I got a chance about 3 weeks ago to play a two-player game against DMTim, who is down in Atlanta. I was down there on a family trip about 3 weeks ago, and he has agreed to join the channel to talk about our experience playing the game two-player. So right now I'm going to jump in with DMTim, and we're going to talk about two-player Gettysburg A Time for Heroes. DMTim, thanks so much for joining, and thanks again for playing Gettysburg A Time for Heroes. Was it like 3 weeks ago that we played, I think?
Yeah, I think it was something like that. It was about as rainy then as it is today. So.
Oh, okay. Yep. If DMTim is down in Atlanta, I'm up in Minnesota and stuff. And so, yeah, thanks very much for playing the game. So let's talk. It took us I think it took us 4 hours from start to finish to play what would be called probably a learning game, right?
Yeah, we had some conversations in between, but I think that was about it, about how long.
Yeah, I was thinking we probably ended up talking for like an hour and actually playing for about 3 hours because my wife was there for a little bit and things like that too. So I was thinking that the 2 hour game length probably is about right had we known how to play before we started and stuff.
Yeah, I think even a little bit quicker even than the 2 hours.
Especially if the game were to end early, because some of the end conditions can wrap up earlier. If like Confederates can win on the first turn, literally,
right?
The second turn, if you get like enough victory points and stuff, which you actually came close to doing. If I remember, I was panicking at one point in the second turn. It looks like, oh my God, you're going to get 3 victory points. This is going to be over before you even start.
Right. So, yeah. That first day is tough for the Yankees.
Yeah, especially depending upon the cards you get, and I didn't know what I was doing either. So we were halfway through the first day when I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably stop you from taking Gettysburg and Cemetery Hill and all these places. But overall thoughts on the game and the gameplay. What did you think?
I really enjoyed the game. I'm a sucker for all American Civil War games. And Worthington always does a great production. The board was beautiful. It was set out really easy to play.
Yeah. I think we both felt at the end. I think when we get to the end of the game, we said this was really fun. And even considering, there were some, I felt like, and this kind of brings up the second thing I thought we could chat a little bit about was the rules, because it did take us a while to get going. But then once we got going, I felt like things went pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned the reading through the rule book was easy. But the implementation was a little more difficult, like trying to cross-reference. And it's a game that I feel like if you know it, you can sit down and teach it really well and really easily, and you can pick it up just like that. But kind of sifting through the rule book, and there were a few times I felt like on that first day that I was steamrolling you and thought we were missing a rule or something, and it was hard to kind of go through and figure that out.
Right. Yeah. I think that's probably, to me, that was one of the few, like if I had to put a pros and cons list to this game, the rule book would be probably a con. I mean, we figured it out, but there were a couple places where I thought in particular, like when we first started out and you get a penalty on the very first activation if you don't attack. And so you were the Confederate forces and you had the first activation and you came on and there's no Union forces there. So it's like, well, wait a second, you can't attack, so It was a little bit of an odd way to write a rule that, okay, as a player, you're going to get penalized if you don't do this thing that is actually impossible to do, and so we looked in the rule book, we must be doing it wrong, right? So we spent like 10 or 15 minutes, both of us looking at the rule books like, no, it doesn't say it. We're getting it right, but I don't see how you can attack. And then a trip to Board Game Geek figured it out, so there were a few places like that, I thought,
Yeah, there were.
Yeah, then I thought once we got going, everything was really smooth. And I've played it subsequently, and it's been really smooth. And like you say, I think the key way to learn it was just exactly what you said, which is find someone to teach it to you, and then it's going to be really smooth. Because I think if we were to talk about the complexity of the game, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it was fairly, I mean, I guess low. I don't know. I don't normally rate them so much. It didn't feel overly complex at the surface. I do think there's some deeper strategy involved. I found going around the flank, just like in the historical battle of, Longstreet's units, it was a little bit further to get to Little Round Top than I expected. And to actually plan on getting enough troops up there with the limited action cards, actually I would have put a lot more thought into it than I should have put more thought into it than I actually did. So at the surface, it's not overly complex at all. But there's some there's depth to it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the Confederate forces too. You've got two ways to win, right? You can get the victory point hexes, or you can just wipe out 3 Union units, which is how you won, I think, at the end, right?
Yeah, I must have.
It was like right at the last turn where I think you had one unit that would have failed, and had that unit failed its cohesion check, you would have won. And then the very next half activation, you attacked me, put one of my units under duress, and I had to roll a cohesion check, and I failed.
Yeah.
And that meant I lost. Yeah. And it went down right to the wire, So even though there were these swings where it's like, oh, you're going to win, and then I was able to get units up, I felt like it had, I thought, a good sense of drama to it.
It really did. And yes, it did. And it came down to it, like you said. It ended up being really tight, a lot tighter than I expected it, especially how I guess kind of long it took us to iron out some of the rules. It ended up being really close.
Yeah. I felt like the first hour was a lot of like both of us looking in the rule book for stuff, and then all of a sudden we were like a quarter of the way through the game in an hour. It's like, we're never going to finish this, and then all of a sudden we didn't have any more questions, and it just flowed, and we were going really fast, and it worked out really well. Yeah. What about your thoughts as this game as a simulation of the Battle of Gettysburg?
I mean, I guess in definition, it's not a simulation, kind of more gamey in a way. I think the way the combat with the dice, you basically just have a pool of dice. Some of the tactics cards you can manipulate with them, which is neat. But otherwise, you're just trying to roll doubles, on a chart. So it's kind of, far from a simulation. But at the same time, I do feel like it has the feel of the Battle of Gettysburg. At the same time, that first part of the battle, I felt like I was pushing you, which they did on that first day. And then once you kind of consolidated as a Union player, I had a hard time beating those fortifications or the tougher geography. Yeah. I felt like it does a good job capturing, like you said. I think it captures the sense of it. But one thing I liked about it is, the way the activation cards work. It's semi-random, so you're not going to get units showing up as they did historically. You could get people showing up, later in the day, earlier in the day, different times. So, and you never really know what units are going to activate or show up. So it's going to be kind of an ahistorical sequence. But I felt like that worked really well, because that means the next time you play, it's going to be a different game. And especially with only one scenario, I feel like it will play differently every time and yet still capture the sense of Gettysburg. Yeah, absolutely. It wanted to keep you on the rails, but it gave you enough breathing room that it didn't feel like you were, staying on the rails. So
yeah. And I definitely wouldn't recommend this to someone looking for a simulation of the Battle of Gettysburg, more of a game about the Battle of Gettysburg. So
absolutely, yeah.
Final thoughts?
It's great. It's actually one. I think gameplay wise, I think it's one I could almost introduce to my normal game board game.
Yeah. Yes.
And I really enjoyed it. It was beautiful. I love the Civil War, so I'll love it no matter what. And it was fun. I really want to sit down and try it again. Now that we know, and we can just hey, let's pull this out and duel it out and play.
Right. Because I felt like there were a couple of mechanics too that we played into, like the readouts, the defensive readouts, and how to use those better, in positioning so that you would force someone to attack along those red arrows and wear them down that way. So I felt like there's some things we kind of figured out as we got going, that if we can play again, as talking about playing on Vassal again at some point in the near future, I think it'd be an interesting to see how much we'd learned from the first time we played.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think you make a great point too about that kind of, I call them Wednesday night war games, where you could have a friend over who isn't a war gamer. You could teach them this game in probably 15, 20 minutes. It's not a hard game, especially once you understand how to play it, to teach someone else to play. And you could play it after dinner on a weeknight and get the whole thing in 2 hours, easy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is good. So yeah, so big thumbs up for me too. I enjoyed it too. And there's actually, the thing I didn't know about it, I'm going to talk about it in the next chunk of the video, is that there's actually official solitaire rules too.
Yeah, is that from Worthington, or
yeah,
is that
from the designer?
Okay,
put them out after. So
Great.
yeah, and I played it over the weekend, and it was good. And I played it two-handed solo now too. So I think for solitaire gamers out there, it's strong as well. But any other last thoughts?
I think that's all I got.
Right. Thanks so much for joining. It's been fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you. A big thanks to DMTim for having that chat about the 2-player mode. Looking through it, and as we talked a little bit after we recorded that, I think the only thing we probably could have elaborated a little bit more on would have been the tactics cards that are in the game. And I think it's an important thing to talk about because they add a lot to the gameplay. There's about 30 or 40 of them. I forget the exact number in the game. But if you play those tactics cards at just the right time, and you're purchasing these as they come through and are made available during the course of play, each game it's going to be different which ones you get and the order they appear in, and then how many you're going to be able to afford depending on how many of these momentum cubes that you got. So I think there's going to be a great variety in terms of how they appear. But some of these cards played at just the right moment can literally break an opponent's turn. And likewise, an opponent can do the same thing to you. So there's a lot of shifting, and you're holding onto these cards and deciding when is exactly the right moment to play them. They're kind of like potions in role-playing games where you can end the game with too many of them. So you got to burn through them because there's not that many turns in the game. But do you use them now? Do you save them? It's a lot of fun decisions, I think, that get wrapped up around this tactics card system. And these tactics cards, it goes back to the bigger point, which I think is replayability in the game. These tactics cards, combined with the semi-random nature of the order of battle and the variety of different tactics and strategies that you can try as either side, really take this game that has one scenario. You basically have the Battle of Gettysburg. It's the same scenario the whole time, but it gives it a lot of depth and replayability because each time the order the leaders appear in are going to be different. The tactics cards that show up and the way they show up and the order they show up are going to be different, and the strategies that you can try are going to be different depending, of course, too, on what tactics cards and the order of battle that you have. So I think this is a game that plays deeper, and it plays deeper than its rule set, which to me is the mark of a really good game. It's pretty easy to learn. Once you get it down, there's a lot of depth to play. So I think the 2-player mode, as Tim mentioned, we both really like that. I've since played another solo game, two-handed, playing the 2-player mode, just to kind of check a little bit with the balance and things. And I hesitate to say too much. You want to play it a lot more than 2-3 times to be able to say much about the balance, of course. But I feel like the way these games are turning out and seeing which sides are winning, that the game has had a good bit of play testing to really refine the play balance as to who can actually win. But enough about 2-player. Let's talk about the thing I didn't think that even existed, the solo mode. That's right. If you watch the overview video that I made, I didn't talk at all about the solo, and I gave the game, I think, a 4.5 out of 10. Well, after I published the video, a couple people commented, and the designers reached out on BoardGame Geek and said, well, there's a solitaire mode that we made for the game too. The official rules are posted on BoardGame Geek, and you can download them. So I downloaded them, and I played that last weekend. It's quite good. I mean, these kinds of things are easy to mail in, right? You could make a little decision tree. It could be kind of like a solo guide more than it is a solo mode, but that's not the case with this at all. The designers said that they ported it over from a different game that used a similar system, but then modified it and adapted it to fit to Gettysburg A Time for Heroes. But what's really cool about it? So you can play either side against either a Confederate bot or the Union bot. The Confederate bot and the Union bot use largely the same rule set. And you've got a decision tree as to what your opponent's going to do when they play their activation cards. And the decision tree is it's got some clever features to it. First up, it's not going to be the same thing each time because all of the leaders in the game are categorized as one of 3 personalities. You can have impetuous, you can have prudent, or you can have opportunistic. And that dictates, you make a dice roll each time it comes up on their activation to determine whether the leader is going to act aggressively or cautiously. And so an impetuous leader is more often than not, I think 4 out of 6 times, they're going to act aggressively. A prudent leader, more often than not, is going to act cautiously. And then an opportunistic leader, who knows what they'll do? They'll do whatever happens to be the case at the moment. And so that dictates the types of actions they're going to take. So as you're playing the bot, you don't really know what way the bot's going to act in any given turn. And then in addition to that, you also have poor, competent, or average leadership, which makes another little slight modification to their die rolls. So it's clear this system has had a lot of thought in it. And as I played through the solo game, it was a good game. The bot's play is modified a little bit in that it doesn't use the tactics card deck at all, but instead it gets some advantages in combat that make it hit really hard. And usually in combat, you need to roll doubles on your dice roll to get a hit, but the bot only needs to roll singles, but they're rolling a fewer number of dice. So, but the end result of it is it can hit really hard. And once that bot gets on an aggressive attack and has a double activation, it can really wail on your units. So you've got a lot of decisions as to how to defend them. It was a fun game. I wonder, playing it over time, I think more often than not, the human player will probably beat the bot, because one of the things I think that's challenging in this game is you're trying to keep your forces, trying to gain objectives on the map, the victory points. And if you're the Union forces, you don't want to let the Confederate forces get the victory points they need to win. And if you're Confederate forces, you're trying to push the Union forces off of those victory points to get the win. But you only lose 3. If you lose 3 units as the Union forces, you lose the game. And if you lose 4 units as the Confederates, you lose the game. And these units get worn down. When you activate them, they lose some cohesion. In combat, they're going to lose cohesion. So these units are getting whittled away as the 3 days of the battle go forward. And at a certain point, you get to this point in time where you've got a unit that's approaching its breaking point, that's right next to an objective or on an objective that you can't afford to lose. And so you've got these very hard decisions as to whether you pull that unit backwards and try to get another unit up there, which may or may not be easy to do depending on what kind of activation cards you get. Or do you tell it just, no, you have to hold your ground regardless of the risk that it has, that a strong enemy attack will break that unit's cohesion. So this fine balance, I think, is really something that brings out, I think good human players are going to have a good sense for when to push with the weakened unit and when to pull one of those weakened units off. The bot does have a decision tree that looks at the unit's cohesion, so it gets at this, but I wonder if it's going to get at it to the same subtlety as a human player. But that aside, that would be asking a lot from a bot, and I think the bot does a very, very good job. I'm sure it gave me a very good game. I ended up winning very close to the end, but it could have gone either way had things been slightly differently. So the end result of all that is, when I said this game is probably a 4.5 out of 10 as a solo game, it's not. It's much better than that. I would say 7.5 or 8 with the solitaire rules. So if you're a solo gamer and you like what you've seen about the game and like what you've heard about the game, I would recommend checking this out. I really like the solitaire mode, and I also enjoyed playing two-handed solitaire much better than I thought too. I had all the cards out, so I knew which card each side was going to play, but I would just play one side as if they didn't know what activation cards and tactics cards the other side had, make their best decisions for the units, and it was quite fun too. I really enjoyed that way. So, surprise! This is a much better solitaire game than I anticipated. So there you have it, some impressions of gameplay on Gettysburg A Time for Heroes from Worthington Publishing. I enjoyed this game a lot more. I thought it was going to be a good kind of block game with maybe some interesting rules and kind of to recreate the Battle of Gettysburg. So I thought it was going to be good, but it exceeded my expectations. I really like this game. This goes into my Wednesday night Wargame category. I'm looking forward to trying this with some friends that are kind of Wargame adjacent board gamers. I think this has a real potential to bring people into the fold, and a lot of people know the Battle of Gettysburg, at least to somewhat to a degree. So I think it's a very good gateway game to bring people into the hobby. It plays fast. The rules, the only weak spot, I'd say the rules could use a little bit of a refinement, a little bit of cleaning up on the rules and things, but we did figure it out. It's not that bad. We figured it out. The rules are okay. We figured it out, got the game going and things. And now, once we understand how to play, it's good. So if you learn how to play, it's really easy to teach other people how to play. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to kind of bringing this game into my regular cycle of board games over the next few months. Looking forward to trying it out on Vassal, getting some more two-player games in, and exploring the solo mode more. more. Gettysburg, A Time from Heroes. Big thumbs up for me. Really have enjoyed my time with this one.